In another riveting episode of this admittedly highbrow YouTube channel, I might pull the pants down on some of the more critical recent commentary. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au, and I get new cars cheap, but Australia only, so website. Card. Okay, this video is sponsored by Olight, but I promise this is the briefest integrated sponsorship of all time. There's a sale that ends tonight, which would be Friday night, the 16th at midnight. And two of my favourite EDC torches are on sale with 35-40% off, whatever it is. The first one is the Mighty Warrior X3. Now, I love this thing as an EDC proposition for in yo bag or on yo belt. This thing is very hard to beat because it's got great grip conformation, it feels solid in your hand, dead simple to operate, on bright. It is a freaking lightsaber, and it's also a rescue tool because it has these zirconium beads on the bezel that you can use to get through a window if you need to rescue a kid or a pet or something trapped in a hot car, or heaven forbid, you turn up on the scene of a crash and the car's on fire and someone can't get themselves out. This could be a real asset getting through that broken window. The other thing that is on sale at the moment is my favourite EDC torch. This is the Warrior Mini 2 in Disco Red Lava Camouflage, which I think is sold out at the moment. So the options on the table for you right now are black, which I carry every day, or Desert Tan, which is also kind of cool as well. Might be the new black for 2024, who knows. It's got a switch on the barrel for fine work, but then it's got the tactical tail switch that is also a frickin' searchlight. In terms of bang for your buck, this thing is awesome because you won't feel it in your pocket and it's super bright. Details in the description. I have also done a complete video on what's on sale and what I like about it, blah, blah, blah. I will put that somewhere up there for you now. But now, let's get back to the Muppet Show, shall we? And thanks, Olight. Appreciate the sponsorship, dudes. Whew. Rebound off the punching bag. Bin cam? I don't think so. It's a bit like the Matrix, actually, the bin, right? There is no spoon, and there is no bin. Or maybe it's all bin. That's a bit zen, isn't it? Mr. Met 05 now. He's a bit critical, Jesus. You wouldn't want to be, some sort of fragile unit if you were a YouTuber, I tell you what. Wouldn't know a decent car if someone parked it on your head. It'd be very difficult to know anything if someone parked a car on your head as a matter of practicality. So anyway, what the Musso does is provide a ute as good as the better than the Triton Navara on a par with the BT50, but thousands less. It is terrible when the education system leaves someone behind. I mean, functional illiteracy is so insidious. If I were your Prime Minister, I would propose a keyboard operator's means test. You'd have to pass one, I don't know, every 12 months or something in order to keep engaged with, the socials, I'd suggest anyway. Have you ever noticed how shitbox Sanyong buyers are always so frickin' defensive? Like, they are such tragically unhung heroes, typically, are they not? Sanyong, of course, intermittently bankrupt, perennially mediocre, bordering on utter shit, I'd suggest. Hashtag truth in advertising. A dude or dudette who calls it, him or herself, golf smart now. 25% of the population has an IQ below 90. I guess they found their calling as YouTube expert advice providers. Dude, what are you, golf smart? Mr. Meadow 5's freaking BFF? I'm unaffected by this kind of thing, as you can clearly tell. Shane McNeil now. Inquired with 2 Cricks spare parts departments. Ah yes, Cricks. The dealership. Rhymes with Anyway, for a price on a new MAF sensor for Renault Traffic 2011 and was quoted $920 plus. I bought the same genuine part from UK delivered for under $230. Was also quoted by another Renault dealer on the Gold Coast $3,000 to replace an AC evaporator, $1,500 for the part and $1,500 to remove and refit, while the dash had to be removed, they claimed. Except the evaporator is on the floor behind the gear shifter cowling and takes 30 seconds to access. So there's that. Also, the evaporators are only about $80 to $360. Well, yes, Shano. Spare parts are the great motoring inequity. I think, the great car owners in equity, because if you had to build a car out of spare parts, you wouldn't get change out of $1 million for anything, would you? But thanks to the internet, there are cheaper options now, and I really do wonder about a system where you can procure the part independently from the United freaking Kingdom and get it put on a plane and FedExed or UPS'd here or something, and it's a quarter of the price that the local dealer charged you. You'd probably get it quicker too, frankly, so there's that. Now, a dude who just simply calls himself John, and he's one of us, I'd have to say. I like the way the channel's going, and I'll be interested in suffering from DRO envy. Digital readout, DRO, okay? It's one of those machining things that is just guaranteed to, tighten things up, down there. DRO envy, watching your machining. Well, yeah, but I am the shittest machinist on earth. It's just a hobby with me. So there's that. Might learn a fair bit over the next couple of years playing around with the new lathe and mill. So there's that. John goes on and says, I thought you may be vaguely interested in what some of us older people have used for years. So attached to my photos of my Victoria Mill, D-Moore lathe, Colchester Bantam and an Omerod shaper in the background of my quite untidy workshop. They are beautiful pictures too, John, I must say. Real trouser TP stuff in my estimation, and the shaper in particular. It doesn't look like it gets too much of a run, and they are somewhat of a forgotten entity in the machining universe. But if you watch some proper machining porn, a shaper in operation, you can't look away. You just can't. They are dead set gorgeous things to watch in operation. So I hope you do dust it off and oil her up and lube it up and make it do things for you. That'd be nice. So I love your work, John, basically. I love you hobby machinist dudes with proper workshops that have been used for years. And it's not so much about the tool, it's about what you can do with it, right? Isn't that always the way? And what man doesn't like another sneaky peek at another man's home shed porn? So if you've got your own home shed porn, get out that new camera that's designed to shoot that, the HoPro action cam. Shoot yo machinist porn and flick it through, and I might give it a run in the manner of John's excellent work in the home shed porn domain. Thank you, John. #respect. Tiger. Now, you must write some of these yourself, John. 3 question marks. Surely, double question mark, comma, space. How the F can people be so stupid, manage to email or post their letters? Now, that's interesting with the punctuation. It's hard to read that, TT, I'd have to say. No, they're all genuine originals, these comments. I wouldn't fake it. In fact, I couldn't fake some of these. Or a better way of putting it is that the comments that get a run in these segments are just better than anything which I could make up. And it just confirms my hypothesis that ambient stupidity in Australia, it really is a thing. There is no bin. Dan Maloney now. Maybe John crap again. Should just have kept his big mouth shut. Well, I guess that's an option. I did try it once, Dan, but it didn't make the video all that compelling. I'd have to say more people than usual were indifferent to it. That's always a mistake, I find. So thanks for your contribution, Cheyenne. I might change my name to Crap Again. What do you think? Now, this is interesting. Homer Horace Gumboot. 2 words, Homer Horace Gumboot. I don't know what the inspiration for that name is, and part of me would be fascinated to find out. However, Homer says, and the worst thing is, these Muppets are breeding. Breeding. B-R-E-A-D-I-N-G. I think he means breeding. This is a bit of an own goal, isn't it, this one? It seems to me, however unintentionally, Homer, you've put yourself in danger of breeding yourself, dude. Nobody wants that. I'm not sure humanity has any need any longer for the breeding gene in the pool. So, therefore, my solemn advice to you would be to keep that baguette wrapped in future, dude. But thank you for your contribution. Now, I love this one too. This is perfect. This is beyond perfect. Trouser TP stuff, it really is. Need a man carpentry. Do os words. Need a man, one word, carpentry. You're a bit of a two, mate. I think he means tool. It is, of course, impossibly serendipitous for anyone with the term carpentry in their name to be unable to spell the word tool, don't you think? Like, dude, just saying. You're a bit of a two, mate. Please tell me what average high schooler was going to physics lectures in the 70s. None, I can tell you. Okay. Well, I took physics at high school, and that was way back. We were still riding, Brontosaurus to school at that stage. It was in 1980 and 1981, and I didn't actually do a formal physics lecture at university until 1982. So you're probably right, Need a Man. It's pretty clear, however, to me at least, that we need a great deal more scientifically literate people in society, if only to displace the washed-up lawyer arseholes that seem to be squatting under false pretences in places like Parliament House and every freaking lobby group giving bad advice to the washed-up lawyer arseholes in Parliament House. So there's that. And I think what we need to do, therefore, is reinvigorate the way we teach basic things like physics to young lads. We just need to change it up and get a bit 21st century with it, because the way we do it at the moment is kind of like Archimedes' principle. Take a note. When a body's immersed in a fluid, either wholly or partially, there's an apparent loss of weight or upthrust equal to the weight of fluid displaced. It's the miracle frickin' cure for insomnia, isn't it? You can just see all of those young lads in the lecture theatre. They're all going, ugh. They're losing consciousness incrementally, and the point doesn't get jammed home, does it? There has to be a better way to explain Archimedes' principle, which gives rise to buoyancy, in a fundamentally different and yet compelling and therefore better way. And that, I would suggest respectfully, is exactly how you teach Archimedes to young lads if you want it to sink in. It would only take a decade of doing things this way, i.e. better, with greater engagement, and you'd find parliamentarians saying, God bless Archimedes and all the young hotties on Earth who achieve neutral buoyancy as a result of his excellent theorem. Now, David Buckles from, across the ditch. Hey, Johnny, with 3 dog sticks. Let us know about nuclear-powered cars. Dog dick, dog dick, dog dick. Space, comma, no space. Your thoughts. Dog's dick, comma, space. No skunk works. Double brackets. One word, close double brackets, question mark, space, comma, no space. Who knows, question mark, space, comma, space. But what do you think? Question mark, space, comma, Dave the NZer. Love your work, bro. That was Dave, incidentally. And I love what you've done to the Merino, Dave, over there in the land of the long white cloud, or whatever the hell you call it. Historically, this very creative work there on the livestock. Nuclear cars. Google the term Ford Nucleon, because before nuclear in the parlance of George W. Bush II, before nuclear became a dirty word, the nuclear age was a thing. Roger Ramjet, the proton energy pill dude, it was gonna liberate us from everything. And Ford designed the Nucleon, which was a car that had its own, uranium fission reactor. And they, you'd change it out every 5,000 miles or something. That was the plan. It only ever got to the scale model stage, but there's plenty of pictures on the internet. Ford Nucleon, you've got to Google it, dude, and just imagine how that might have played out on the roads around us by this sort of time, given that they did that in the 50s, I think, and they would have had 75 years worth of small-scale Fukushimas on their hands on the road by now. Isn't it lucky that it never got past that particular stage? Like, dude, and it was a Ford, so Chernobyl, eat your heart out. What could possibly have gone wrong? Anyway, Matty Black now. Matty is a regular commentator and not a dick, I'd have to say. He's got some excellent work there in the comments feed. Hashtag respect and thank you, Matty Black. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Matthew Black. Some guys used a magnetic drill at a bank in my town in 1978. Lifted 1.7 million bucks. Never been caught. Australia's largest bank robbery, I believe. Now that's fascinating, Matty, because I'd never heard of that. I lived in a cultural void all my life, and yet had no freaking idea, dude, but totally true. 23rd of November, 1978. Still, I was 15 there. I was probably concentrating on, other stuff. Murwillumbah, the Westpac, which probably back then was the Bank of New South Shitsville, memory serves. 1.7 million bucks. They used a mighty mag drill to get through the safe in the dead o' night, and they chose that bank branch because it had something to do, I think, if memory serves, about the fact that a dirty big truck full of money would kind of use the safe as a storage facility for wherever the fuck the money was going next, and it was like packed with all of this cash, and they sort of crept in under the dead o' night and just went at the safe with a mag drill and got through it. And then it was like national news, and the whole town was like all cops, and they were on it. But the only problem with that was it's unsolved to this day. Incidentally, in today's money, that would be a heist of roughly 10 million smackers. So a couple of people have claimed responsibility for this, but I don't think there's any proof. I don't know if they'll ever get to the bottom of this. They're too busy putting out fires after tasering 93-year-old grandmothers attacking big strapping police officers from a Zimmer frame. Fuck's sake. You want to ruin the population's relationship with the cops and law and order generally. That's how you do it. Google now. Now, this is a fairly long one. It's going to test my voice just a little bit, but the thing about critics is they're utterly sincere. Like, you've got to wonder, if someone's blowing smoke up your ass, as pleasant as that is, depending on who, they might be doing it with an ulterior motive in mind, mightn't they? But the critic, right, he's fucking sincere. He's extremely severe and sincere, and Google is both of those things. So, without further ado, here we go. You make me laugh how you admit you're not a good machinist. It's apostrophe R-E, dipshit. You're not a good machinist, but you're always patting yourself on the back for being some kind of engineering rocket scientist. I was so fucking good at engineering that I essentially walked out of university and became a journalist. Make of that what you will, dude. But you have no effing idea on a practical side of things. In the metal industry, the blue-collar workers hate the engineers for such shit designs. In the construction industry, we hate the architects for drafting such dumb-ass plans. You, sir, are one of those flogs who have no idea about real-world hands-on work. Keep patting yourself on the back, mate. You're doing a good job keeping our country moving forward and making wise decisions. If you've been divorced 5 times is anything to go off of, you almighty and wise one. Well, thank you, Google. I appreciate your candour and sincerity. As for you, sir, one of those flogs who have no idea about real-world hands-on work, I walked into a tool room at the age of 15, fuckwit, and I never really walked out. You know, every school holidays while other chaps were chasing skirt, I was chasing holes in brass castings and tapping threads into them and riveting things of this nature. But it taught me a shitload. I had a great teacher who was hard but fair, I'd have to say, and that taught me a lot about using a lathe and drill press, things of this nature. Did it all the time, learnt to sharpen drills by hand, blah, blah, blah. So he inspired me to become an engineer, actually. And in engineering school, as it were, I spent 6 months every year in industry and 6 months at university. So that was for a total of 6 years. So I spent 3 years in total in heavy industry. And for the first 3 patches of 6 months, I spent it essentially on the shop floor and in places like testing laboratories. And it was a highly unionised place, okay? So we weren't, as cadets, we weren't part of the trade workforce, and we were not allowed, by virtue of sparking off some hideous demarcation dispute, we weren't allowed to do actual work, but we had access to all the toys. And that meant, for example, when I spent 6 months in a welding bay next to another young cadet engineer that I was studying with, we couldn't do anything that was actual production in terms of the factory, but the Boilermaker's shop was just down there. So we got this big fuck-off cart, routinely, trundled it off down to the Boilermaker's shop, got all of the scraps we could stacked up on the cart, and we just made modern art masterpieces with welding, right? And there were all these highly skilled tradies there, and they'd look at some of the stuff we were building and just shake their heads. But at the same time, if you want to learn vertical up stick welding, which is a bit of a skill, not that hard, but you need to know the tricks. There's a little sort of, triangle pattern that you need to use, and you probably have to wind things back a little bit in terms of the heat coming out of your ray gun. Then we learn how to do that and weld overhead and stuff like that. And I will never weld overhead if I could avoid it ever again, because it's a great way to have a shower. And the only difference between it and a routine shower is the fact that what's coming out is not water, but it's freaking molten steel, and it rains all over you, right? If you've ever wondered why welders wear the cap over one ear, typically if they're right-handed, it's left ear, because that's where the shower is every time. And if you're a lefty like me, you wear it on the other ear. That's kind of why. And downhand every time if you possibly can, dude. The point I'm making is, there are some engineers, and I'm a bit critical of them, who have absolutely no hands-on ability. They've never had their hands on the tools, and they don't appreciate what they do. I don't claim to be a machinist. I don't claim to be a welder. I don't claim to be a tool maker. But I think I've run into this obstacle plenty of times in the past, 40 years or so, where some self-opinionated tradie wants to rip into engineers for things like building machines that are difficult to work on. And I'd suggest that a car is a quintessential example of that. The reason a car, for example, is difficult to service is because it's not built with optimizing the ease of servicing as a fundamental design constraint. It's built to build easily. The engine and transmission is rolling down like this and the body gets dropped on it. That's why it's hard to work on the engine once they're together, because all of the work in terms of the construction is done. And the reason for that is because of packaging. There's so many things to fit into an engine bay, and you want to minimise the space so you can maximise the volume of the passenger compartment. There are these kinds of fundamental design considerations, and the myopic view of some dipshit tradies is that it should be all about them and making it easy for them to service the car. And that's just not how this works, okay? I'd further say that I have the utmost respect for you if you're a good tradie, and it doesn't matter what the trade is, dude. If you're good at it, you are highly skilled. You can be a machinist or a welder or a mechanic or a concreter. It doesn't matter what the trade is. If you're good at it, I've got the utmost respect for you, and I've always tried to understand as much as I can of that side of the equation, because it makes you better as an engineer. It really does. It gives you a greater appreciation for the kinds of problems that those in the trade workforce have to deal with. And incidentally, the best mechanics, best tool makers, best welders that I've ever worked with, they've been the ones who wanted to know why they had to do it that way, right? And if you can collaborate like that, it's Gestalt theory. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So I'm inferring, Google, that you're not one of those really slick tradies, dude. You're the opposite kind who just thinks they know better than an engineer. And you don't know better than an engineer, you just know different stuff, right? The thing about most of the tradies I've ever met who are tradies who didn't go on to do engineering is that they are critical of the design, but they can't do it themselves. Like, you can put the car together, you can weld the panels together, you can drill the holes, you can turn parts down to really precise tolerances, but most tradies don't know why they're doing it. So you need both sides to have a coin, and you myopic dipshit tradies need to realise that the other side of the coin, the one that I trained on, is also important. So there's that. Rare moment of sincerity from one. There is no bin. Uncle Phil now. The problem with your logic about the rust only being under joints and not spreading is that joints are the structural key points in a vehicle. If the joints rust away, you'll have a pile of completely separate, lovely painted panels, none of them attached to the others. It also, get it right, I want to faithfully reproduce what Uncle Phil is presenting here. It also has important implications in crashworthiness. Yeah, now, Uncle Phil is talking about that BYD that was wrecked recently, and as it came apart, it came to light that there was a degree of rust where the joints were between some of the panels. And I would say that, yeah, potentially this is the case, but if the panels themselves are assembled and then either hot-dipped or electroplated, then the galvanisation cathodic protection thing is still going to work to protect the steel, even in areas that don't get the galvanisation because they're in electrical contact. And galvanisation is cathodic protection, it's electrochemical. And if there's electrical contact, it really slows down the rust. And I guess if you're driving around in Canada in the middle of winter where there's like a kilo of salt every foot of the road, then that is going to speed up corrosion. And if you're driving around in Australia where it's hardly ever cold enough to freeze water in most of the joint, then, you know, it's probably not going to be that big a deal. So I'd say the rust that was uncovered is good for remarking on. It makes for good pictures, it makes for a good question mark. And I also think BYD handled it really badly from the point of view of just not addressing the core fundamentals of what was uncovered, right? But I'd also suggest that it's probably not an unmitigated disaster in the context of cars falling apart. It's probably not going to work that way if there was sufficient electroplating or hot dip galvanising elsewhere in electrical contact with those parts. Jeffrey Storer now goes, try getting paper bag, drop in a magnet, pick up the swath. I think he means swarf. Turn bag inside out, works a treat on drill press, clean up. Yeah, dude. Or you could just use one of these absolutely brilliant magnetic swarf wands from Excision. You can probably see a little bit of residual swarf falling off this baby now, and when the magnet's energised, you just pick it all up like it's 1999, and there it is. And then when you want to dispose of it, just, I mean, And you can store them in kooky places as well. That's always nice. So where are you going to find a paper bag these days anyway? Do they still even make paper bags? They were a salient feature of school-time lunch when I was a lad, but then, catching the Brontosaurus home was also one of those things that we just all took for granted. And now, finally, ending this baker's dozen of critical commentary. One from a dude who I will just call Piehole, but in the manner of a nickname, who goes, because I know some of you fucking hate that as well, CO2 is not a problem. Now, I've had a spate of CO2 is not a problem. It's just plant food. You climate change deniers, please don't breed, because if you are in that camp, you have been hoodwinked by the internets, which has allowed you to weaponize your confirmation bias and fracture the epistemology of your reality. Meanwhile, out here in ontological reality, climate change is real. Humans are causing it. There is an orgy of scientific evidence to this effect, and a whole bunch of credible scientific institutions agree, including NASA, which spends more of its time geosensing than it does looking out for ET, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Aeronautical Administration in the United States, the Bureau of Meteorology here and overseas as well, the CSIRO has excellent papers on it. There's no doubt. You can look back in time and the ice cores, the polar ice cores, they can drill the polar ice cap and just look back in time at atmospheric concentrations, and it's all pretty integrated and very difficult to shoot down. And meanwhile, you geniuses who are confirmation bias hoodwinked, right? You still think CO2 is not a problem. So my challenge to you is contact the Pentagon. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would be a good place to start, because he's spending a lot of his time and that of his subordinates, which would be everyone in the US military, making plans about what to do with the geopolitical unrest that is going to flow from unhinged climate change into the future. And if that's all for nothing, because CO2 is really plant food, or in this case, from Piehole, CO2 is not a problem, then just convince him and get him to make the requisite edits with NASA and NOAA, and let the Bureau of Meteorology know over here in Shitsville and the CSIRO as well, and then I'll just fall into line, dude. But I won't be breath holding in the meantime. And if you think it can't be a problem because the concentration is like 400 parts per million in the atmosphere, the way the atmosphere rolls is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% everything else. And there are some gases, particularly nasty ones, that become life-threatening in concentrations measured in the parts per billion. So there's that. So the final thing about CO2 not being a problem is just say that. I double dead dingoes frickin' donga dare you to say that to anybody who was on the team at NASA during the Apollo 13 crisis, in particular the 3 poor bastard astronauts in the spacecraft. If you think CO2 is not a problem, talk to one of them, dude. And read the biography of the submarine, the Kursk, which sank in the Barents Sea in, don't quote me, 1984, something like that. In the 80s anyway. So read that if you think CO2 is not a problem. For the rest of you who are not hoodwinked like that, not outraged, not shouting at the glass teat before you now, thanks very much for joining me on this roast of the great unwashed this Friday afternoon/evening, or whenever you manage to watch this video. Don't forget the Olight sale, if you're watching it in a timely fashion, ends at midnight. These things are freaking awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.